I am your huckleberry. Hello and welcome to another video. My name is Heather and as always I'm reading with a vengeance and I hope you are too. Big love to you OGs who keep coming back, and if you're new to my channel, very warm welcome to you. I'm very happy to have you here and I hope everybody is doing very well. It has been a hot minute since I've done a wrap-up because I am in the middle of reading the books for the Booktube prize. So the books that I have read for the month of June, I can't talk about in this wrap-up. So by the time mid-month came around, I'd only read, I think, 3 or 4 books that I could talk about. And so I didn't do a mid-month wrap-up. And so I saved them all until the end. I'm regretting it. I did this the last time I judged the Booktube prize. And I don't know why I do this to myself. I think from now on, whether I have 3 books or 13 books, I'm going to do my mid-month wrap-up because it's been so long since I read my first book of the month. Usually when I do my wrap-ups, it's when I do my life updates. So I do have some other stuff to talk to you about before I get to the books. I was really not quite certain whether I was going to even record today because it's been a week. You guys, it's been a week. My husband and one of my dogs, Jake, have been sick this week. Now, my husband, Jason, he has a sinus infection. He's miserable. I feel really bad for him, but he's going to be fine. Jake, on the other hand, we don't know what's going on with him. Today is Friday that I'm filming. We woke up Wednesday morning and he had been sick in the night. And he continued to be sick and he didn't eat. And he still hasn't eaten. So he has not eaten since Tuesday evening. It is now Thursday or Friday afternoon. My husband took him to the vet yesterday and many hundreds of dollars later to find out they can't find anything wrong. He seems to be a little better now than he was this morning, so I decided to go ahead and record. If you guys wouldn't mind just keeping Jake in your thoughts and sending him well wishes. He is one of the loves of my life and it hurts my heart that he is so uncomfortable. So I would really appreciate it. You just sending all of your good juju my way. I would really, really, really love it. Thank you. So let's move on to some other stuff. Other stuff that's been keeping us busy. I can't remember if I told you this during one of my recent videos, but my husband and I went to Tampa a couple of weeks ago. This was like less than a week after I came back from London. He belongs to a motorcycle club and they have kind of an annual convention where all the chapters across the country converge into one town and they have events and get-togethers and rides, of course. And it's a lot of fun. It was the first time that we were able to go to one. We were there for 4 days, had some good rides, found a couple of little free libraries. And yeah, that was a really enjoyable time. An update for my yoga teaching certificate. I finally passed my exam. The certificate is in the mail. I'm so excited that this chapter in my life has been completed and I finished it successfully. I am now a certified yoga instructor. Whether or not I'll actually pursue a position as a yoga instructor, that remains to be seen. That was quite an arduous process and I'm super proud to have finished and I wanted to share that with you guys. And the last bit of news I wanted to share with you before I get to the books is we had another celebrity in the store yesterday. It was so exciting. I was walking out onto the floor and this woman was standing in front of the shelf where we have all of our staff picks. And so I actually saw her from the side first. I recognized her immediately, but I did a 180 and went back to the back to tell the ladies in the back. It was Toni Collette. It was so exciting. I believe she was there with her children. That was super exciting for me. I absolutely loved her in Mariel's Wedding. I loved her in The Sixth Sense. There's that scene in the car with her son. I've seen it multiple times and every single time I tear up. I think she's a fantastic actress. She's in one of my favorite movies of all time, and that's Little Miss Sunshine. I totally geeked out over her. I was able to control myself physically, but internally I was losing my mind. It was super fun. So yeah, that's the last little bit of tidbit life news. Wait. I have one other piece of business, kind of a big deal, because I told you that I would tell you the winner of my giveaway during this video. So let's do that. So I was going to do it live, but I knew that was just going to be too much. I'm not technologically advanced enough to have like screen within screen live. So then I decided, well, I'll just record it, me doing the random number generator and then going down the comments to pick a winner. And I did that, and it's a mess. It's just a mess. So you're gonna have to trust me. I did a random number generator. I physically counted all the comments that were made. Without further ado, here are the winners of the prizes. Hello, Editing Heather here, and I completely messed up the reading of the names. I switched them up, saying the name of the winner for the bag and the name of the winner for the book. You both were very specific on which prize that you wanted, and I totally switched it around and messed it up. So I just wanted to re-record because there was no way I could edit it and make it right. The winner of the bag, this canvas tote that I hand embroidered, this cute little graphic here. The winner of this bag is Tanya Camacho 7542. So Tanya, congratulations. And the winner of the book Hellbent by Lee Bardugo, new hardcover copy, is Cynthia Fialka. So I apologize if I don't pronounce that correctly, but Cynthia Fialka, you have won the book. If you both would just send me your mailing address to my email, it's in the description box below, and it's in the About tab on my channel. So send me your mailing address and I will get those prizes to you. Congratulations to you both. Thank you all so much for your participation in the giveaway. It was fun for me. I'm happy to do this. It won't be my last giveaway, so stay tuned for more stuff coming up. And to Cynthia and Tanya, I hope you both enjoy your gifts. All right, let's get on with the books, shall we? The first book that I read in the month of June was Boundary Waters by William Kent Kruger. This is the second in the Cork O'Connor series. I started reading the series in April or May, I can't remember. The first book was Iron Lake. I saw that the second one in the series was available on audio, so why not? And it was good. I really liked it. This series, of course, called Cork O'Connor because it follows Cork O'Connor, who is a former Chicago police officer who has left that position and he has returned to his hometown, a very small town in Minnesota, really, really far north, like right on the Canadian border. And I think at one point he became the sheriff of that town, but when you meet him in the first of the series, he's no longer a sheriff in that town. But people come to him for help anyways. In the second book of the series, you're following Cork as he is hired to find a missing young woman who is a country western singer at the height of her popularity. Her father comes to town and asks Cork for help finding her because she's gone missing. Through some preliminary investigation, Cork learns that she is probably in the deep woods of this area of very unforgiving territory. So the bulk of this story is following Cork, the girl's dad, a man that Cork knows who has kind of sour history with Cork. He's a Native American and he knows this area really well, as does his 10-year-old son. They're on the search with him, as well as 2 FBI agents and an ex-con. It's just one of those stories where there's people who are not who they seem. There's somebody else looking for Shiloh. If I haven't mentioned, the country western singer's name is Shiloh. Someone else is looking for her as well, but not for good reasons. So it's up to Cork to find her before they do. And one of the connections that Cork also has to Shiloh is that Cork knew Shiloh's mother when he was a young boy. I think she was a few years older. Cork kind of had a little crush on her. He feels a connection and he feels compelled to help to find Shiloh. There are family secrets involved, as well as the mystery of why Shiloh has gone missing and why these other people are looking for her. There's some political scandal that is involved here. Solid mystery here. I really enjoyed following this story. I'm really enjoying this series as a whole. I'm looking forward to reading the third one. As I said about the first one, there is some Native American folklore that is included in the storytelling, but not too much that you're distracted from the core story. So I really appreciate that. I believe the Native American is Anishinaabe, and a big part of their culture is communing with nature. That is, I find, a very fascinating way that Kruger tells his story. The way he explores that, it's just an added bonus to the story, and I, for one, really, really appreciate it. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed this story, and I will continue on with the series, and I recommend it. The next book I attempted to read was Dirty Laundry by Disha Bose. This is a debut novel. I was pretty excited about it. It was supposed to be a mystery thriller. I attempted to listen to this book. There were a couple of problems. I ended up DNFing at 20%. The story takes place in Ireland in a small Irish village, and I think you're following 2 or 3 couples in this village, and someone ends up being murdered and the rest of the people in the village are suspects, but I didn't get that far. All of the characters were incredibly unlikable, but the thing, unfortunately, that made me stop listening to this book, I don't understand how an editor or whoever's in charge of releasing this out into the wild let this go. The narrator had the sniffles, like bad. Every 10, 20 seconds, she sniffed, like wet sniffles, and it was so gross, and I can't do it. It was a lot. So I could not continue on with this book. But I don't think that I would really care for it if I was reading the physical copy either, because like I said, none of the characters were very likable. I couldn't connect to anybody. They were either whiny or mean or snobby. This book had nothing going on for me. Since it was a book that I was really interested in reading, and I usually get so excited for debut novels, I thought, I'm really, really curious. So I ended up looking up the summary of the book and read how it ends, and I don't feel like I missed anything. I'm glad I didn't spend any more time on this book, and it just kind of validated my decision to DNF. So no, I don't recommend this book, sadly. I don't know if the characters were meant to be unlikable, if that was by design of the author, but it just didn't work for me. The next book I read was Black Butterflies by Priscilla Morris. This book was shortlisted on the Women's Prize for Fiction. It didn't win, but it was predicted to win by a lot of people. A lot of people really, really love this book, and I'm no different. I enjoyed this book very, very much. This follows Zora. Zora is a 52, 53-year-old woman living in Sarajevo, and this is a look inside the Bosnian War, specifically the Sarajevo siege, lasting from 1992 to 1996, I believe. Zora is living with her husband when the siege hits, but it was one of those things that kind of came on slowly. Zora sends her husband and her elderly mother to England to stay with her grown daughter, and Zora stays behind. I can't remember the reason why she stays behind. She's an art teacher, and art plays a really big part in this story. I can't remember the reason she stays behind, but I do remember that it was a solid reason, a good reason. But she stays behind, well, with the design to leave and join her husband and mom and the rest of her family at a later time. Turns out things get really, really bad really fast, and Zora, as well as everybody else in town, are unable to leave. The town is bombed, the food supply is shortened, and Zora is left to live in absolute fear and starvation and utter hopelessness. This story is very, very hard-hitting, and you're following Zora's life as things get progressively bad. And I was left to think of a similar, like an analogy for this as like a toad that you put in water and you slowly heat up the water and the toad doesn't even know it's being boiled to death. That's how things kind of went down here. People weren't really given the opportunity to escape and flee the town before it got really, really bad. And I can't even imagine being in such a situation. And what's crazy about this, for me, it read like the timeline was 60, 70, 80 years ago rather than barely 20 years ago, maybe 25 years ago. I guess 30 years ago. But still, 30 years ago is not that long ago, considering what happened to these people. And I was in my early 20s at the time this happened, and I remember reading headlines and hearing little snippets here and there in the news, but this wasn't something that I knew much about at the time. This was an eye-opener for me. I love a story that can educate me at the same time as I really, really hesitate to say entertain, because a story like this I don't think is entertaining, but it really, truly kept me engaged and enthralled. And I'm just so happy that I came across this book to teach me a thing or two that people should know about. This was beautifully written. I mean, it's such a tragic, tragic story, but using such beautiful words and prose. This absolutely belonged on the short list, and I'm so happy that it got the accolades that it did, and more people are reading this because of the Women's Prize for Fiction. This is a debut novel, which is astonishing. I'm so impressed by that. It's just beautifully written. There's a descriptiveness to everything that's going on in Sarajevo and in Zora's life, and the surroundings and her art, the geography and the atmosphere, completely immersive without being too descriptive. The story is beautiful, it's tragic, it's devastating, it's memorable, it's educational, it's important. I have to tell you, I choked up at the end of this. I don't want to spoil what happens at the end, but for the thing that happens at the end, I'm an absolute sucker for. Sorry to sound cryptic, but I'm a sucker for it, and I choked up. I love this book, you guys. I absolutely recommend this book if you haven't read it already. I love this book, and I can't wait to see what Priscilla Morris comes out with next. I might as well go ahead and address the elephant in the room. As you might have noticed, I have yet to give a star rating for a book in this wrap-up. I think I have decided that I'm not going to give star ratings for books anymore. I'm going to tell you how I felt about them. I'm going to tell you whether or not I recommend them, what works for me, what I like, what I dislike, but I've grown kind of uncomfortable with star ratings. This book is one of several books, I think, that really just kind of made the decision for me. When I went to rate this book to give it a star rating, I really was uncomfortable about giving a story like this that actually happened. I mean, this is based on true events. This is based on Priscilla Morris, some family members of Priscilla Morris. It's not a memoir, but what happened in this book actually happened, and it happened to someone close to the author. And I just felt like giving a star rating kind of dehumanized it. And I'm not judging anybody who gives star ratings, and I'll continue to do it on Goodreads. But honestly, with talking to you about these books, I just want to tell you what I like, what I don't like, and whether or not I'd recommend it. So I hope that's okay with you. You have seen the last of star ratings. The next book I read was Take My Hand by Dolan Perkins Valdez, but I can't talk to you about it yet because that is a book that I read for the Booktube prize that I am judging, so I will not be doing my reviews until August. While I'm on the subject, I also read Young Mungo by Douglas Stewart for the Booktube prize, so you won't be hearing my thoughts about those until August. The next book I read was Cheri by Joanne Beard. This is a little tiny book. It's, I would say, a short story, if not a novella. 76 pages. This was in the goodie bag when I went to the Women's Prize for Fiction Festival. This is one of the books that I got in my goodie bag. As a matter of fact, I think I talked about this in one of my recent hauls or the next haul that's coming. I read this on the airplane ride back from London. This is also based on a true person. This follows Cheri as she is dealing with a cancer diagnosis. She gets a cancer diagnosis, she's treated for it, she goes through some very, very painful procedures, she goes through remission, and then it comes back. And then she contacts Dr. Jack Kevorkian, who was a real live doctor who was also known as Dr. Death because he assisted in multiple suicides, ended up serving time in prison. This follows Cheri in her decision to control when her life ends. It talks about what her daughters think about that and how they react to it, and how Cheri herself goes through this process. I am glad this was a short story. It was very depressing, but also enlightening though, because the thought process that Cheri has is that she knows her life is going to end and she wants to do it on her terms. And people who are not immediately faced with their mortality have a really hard time with that. The only thing that I had a problem with, and I wouldn't say a problem, But I wonder, I'm just curious why the author didn't write from Cheri's perspective. I feel like this would have been a little bit more harder hitting. And maybe that's by design. Maybe the author didn't want it to be hard hitting. But I don't know. I would have felt more connected to Cheri had this been from first person perspective. But I did find Cheri's story compelling. Her line of thinking as far as what goes through her mind when we're faced with dying, because it is an inevitability. We don't know how we're going to handle it until we get to that point. I thought this was a brave story to tell. There's a note at the end by the author, and it doesn't make it clear whether the author knew Cheri personally, but she definitely knew of her and her circumstances, and she kind of gave Cheri a voice. I'm glad I read this book. It is short. I would recommend it if you're intrigued by that whole idea of, one woman's feeling of what she chooses to do at the end of her life. It's beautifully written. It's accessible. It's not overly literary, whatever that means. Yeah, I would recommend this. The next book I read was Women Talking by Miriam Toews. You guys, oh, what a bummer this was. This was such a disappointment for me, unfortunately. So the timeline on how this book came to be on my TBR, I am a huge Frances McDormand fan. The only reason I even heard of the movie Women Talking was that it was nominated for an Oscar. I saw that Frances McDormand was in it. I heard maybe a little tidbit of what it was about, and I wanted to see it. And then I found out it was based on a book written by Miriam Toews. If you don't know this, I read Fight Night by Miriam Toews, and I absolutely loved it. I believe it's in my top 20 favorites from 2021 or 2022. And I thought, well, of course I have to read it before I watch it. That's the way I think things should be done. So I decided to read it, and it became available on Audible, and I listened to it. It was very well narrated, but it was so slow. Toews did not go in a very imaginative direction as far as telling the story. So let me back up. This is based on true events, again, that happened in a Mennonite colony where women were drugged and sexually assaulted by the men in the colony. They claimed that they were being assaulted by demons, but they were discovered, and what this story follows is the women have to decide, while those men, they're dealing with, I think, the charges that are filed against them. The women stay behind in the colony, and they all come together to have kind of a discussion to decide whether they're going to stay and say nothing, whether they're going to stay and fight, or whether they're going to just leave the colony altogether. This whole book is this discussion among these women who have been assaulted by the men in their community, and what they're going to do about it and why. This did not go in the way that I thought it could have gone. This could have been, I think, a much more interesting story. This was just a discussion among these women of whether or not they should stay or go or fight, and what that looks like, and what are they going to do if they leave. There are religious ramifications in this particular community, and what would God do, and that kind of thing. And I don't know if it's because I'm not a particularly religious person that I just didn't have any interest at all in those arguments. I know that's a real thing for many people, specifically this particular community, but it didn't make for an interesting read. I mean, when I heard about the story and what actually happened, this actually happened. These men of God, drugged the women, mothers, daughters. They did not discriminate. They drugged them and then raped them, and then gaslit them by saying, "Oh, you must have been visited by demons." What? So that alone, I wanted to know more about. That was what I wanted to know, the outcome of this. And I wanted to know what these women were going to do about it. And it gave absolutely no satisfaction whatsoever. Now, I understand that if this were a nonfiction book telling what happened, these are the facts, this is what happened, I can appreciate that. If you're going to fictionalize it and tell a story for entertainment purposes. Another reason for fictionalizing a story, I think, is to add some imaginative components to it. And those imaginative components should keep a reader engaged, in my very humble opinion. There's just so many ways I think Taves could have taken the story. You know, there were doors and options that she had, and the door labeled most boring, least engaging, and that's the story that she picked. Will I still watch the movie? Perhaps. If you're interested in this story at all, I would probably recommend the movie, even though I haven't seen it yet, over the book at this point, because the book just wasn't, I didn't enjoy it. But the next book I very much enjoyed, and that is OMFG Bees by Matt Kratt. The little subtitle is Bees Are So Amazing and You're About to Find Out Why. This was on display at the bookstore that I work at. I just thought it was just an adorable cover, and I love bees. Yes, Gloria, I thought of you when I saw it. I don't know if you have this yet. I could forward it on to you if you don't have it or you haven't read it yet. If you don't know who I'm talking about, Gloria Z. Thompson, who's a booktuber that I watch regularly. She loves bees. So anyways, this book, it's adorable. It is nonfiction. It's fairly short. I read it in one sitting. There's like 128 pages. It's just information about bees, written by somebody who has an absolute unadulterated love for bees, and it's written with humor and tongue-in-cheek and educational. There's lots of illustrations that are adorable with little notes by the illustrations. You've got little comparisons and telling you the difference between a drone and a worker bee and the queen. Just adorable. I absolutely love this little book. The funniest page on this is this page, A Note on Murder Hornets. Hilarious. Equally hilarious and terrifying about these murder hornets. But yeah, just to give you an example, some of the chapters names are People Who Don't Like Bees, Bees and Not Bees, What is a Bee? And most importantly, he talks a lot about why bees are important for our planet, for people, for the survival of humans and all of nature, really. If you have a fear of bees, I would definitely recommend this book. They will not hurt you unless you aggravate them. And if you're afraid of them, why would you aggravate them? Absolutely love this book. Absolutely recommend it highly. Not to mention, it's just adorable. Next book I read, I've been super excited to talk to you about, and that is Nightcrawling by Layla Motley. I had this on my Libby app for so many months on hold, and it finally became available, and I listened to it, and oh my God, it was so good, you guys. This is a debut novel, unbelievable. The author started writing this story when she was 17 years old. So impressive. This is another story that is based on true events. So this story is based on a scandal that happened in the Oakland Police Department in about 2015. The scandal was that there were several members of the Oakland Police Department who were abusing their power, sexually assaulting prostitutes. So the story Nightcrawling follows Kiara. She is a 17-year-old girl who is living with her 19-year-old brother, Marcus. They are living together alone. Their father has, after serving time in prison, has died. Their mother was sent away to be in kind of a halfway house / rehab after a pretty bad event happens that I won't share with you here. They are struggling to make ends meet. They both dropped out of high school because they need to work in order to pay the rent and to feed themselves. Kiara is struggling to make ends meet. She is working all these menial jobs with minimum wage, just isn't cutting it. And Marcus is not helping out because he thinks he's going to be some rap star. So he's working on his music and he refuses to get a job. They are very, very close, but they are at odds with each other about Marcus getting a job instead of pursuing his dream to be a singer. Kiara also feels pressure because her neighbor is a drug addict and she has disappeared and is completely neglecting her 9-year-old son. And Kiara feels responsible to feed and take care of, I can't remember his name. Anyways, a 9-year-old boy. One night Kiara is out, she gets really drunk, and in a strange turn of events, she ends up having sex with this guy, and he pays her, and he pays her a lot of money. And she finds herself in this situation where the desperation that she feels to take care of the people that need her, she is doing this thing that she never thought that she would do, but it pays very, very well, and she becomes a prostitute. As I'm reading this book, I have to be honest, it was a little slow at first. I'm wondering where it was going, what was the point of telling this story, and then all of a sudden, Kiara finds herself picked up by the police, but they don't, instead of taking her in, they take her to a motel room. Bad things happen, and Kiara finds herself trapped. And from that point on, I was very, very engaged in the story. And then it just gets worse from there because Internal Affairs finds out what's going on. They reach out to Kiara to become a witness as they try to prosecute the police officers involved, and things just spiral out of control for Kiara. This is such a crazy story, and the fact that this happened, it's just crazy. So this follows Kiara, and it's from her perspective. And you are reading her kind of inner monologues at times that at first I was like, does a 17-year-old talk this way? Well, sometimes I think they do. She had this poetic way of describing things, not just the world around her, but her own thoughts that were just beautiful. She had a way of seeing the world as it is without sounding cynical about it. And I really, really found that fascinating and engaging. And I loved the way the story was told. I really loved Kiara. I felt for her. I wanted to help her. The fact that Motley started writing this when she was 17 years old, I mean, I'm super impressed. You guys, this book was published in 2022, and the author is currently 21 years old. There's a lot more going on in this book than just Kiara falling into prostitution and then getting caught up in a police scandal. There's her relationship with her brother that is super moving. There's a relationship with her mother that is complicated. There's a relationship between Kiara and this 9-year-old boy that she's trying to take care of that is just heartbreaking for both of them. I rooted for Kiara in this story. Did she make some bad decisions? Well, yes, but did she make decisions that I feel like she didn't have a choice but make? Yeah. Tragically, there's a system out there that forces people to make poor decisions, unfortunately, and this story explores that. It's done very, very well. I would highly recommend this book. All kinds of triggers, but if you want a hard-hitting story about something that actually happened, I absolutely recommend this book, and I cannot wait to see what Layla Motley does next. Next book I read, guys, was Counterfeit by Kirsten Chin. I think this one landed on my radar to read because it was one of Reese Witherspoon's book club books, and it became available on my Libby app, and so I did listen to it. It was well narrated. For the most part, it was pretty good. This one follows Ava, and she is a Chinese American kind of living a seemingly perfect life. She is a lawyer by trade, but she has walked away from her career to take care of her husband and her newborn son. Her husband is a doctor, a successful one. They live in a nice house. They live in a nice community. Her son is adorable, but he is prone to tantrums. That is making Ava lose her mind a little bit. Ava is straight-laced. She's a rule follower. And despite all the things in her life that seem to be things that she longed for, yet she's completely unfulfilled. Enter Winnie, who was her college roommate 15 years ago, who left college abruptly under mysterious circumstances, and Ava never kept in touch with Winnie. But all of a sudden, Winnie shows up in her life. She is no longer the shy girl that Ava once knew. She is confident. She is dripping in luxury. And Winnie asks Ava for her help in what at first seems to be innocent, but what Ava finds out is that Winnie is running a scam on fake designer bags. Ava is initially appalled, immediately turns Winnie down and says, I don't want to be involved in this. I don't think we should be friends anymore. But Ava finds herself in a situation similarly to Cheri in Nightcrawling, where she is backed into a corner where she needs money fast. So that's how Ava finds herself involved in this scam. The story goes from there. What makes this story interesting is that it's told in dual perspective. I would say the first third of the book is completely from Ava's point of view. It's told in second person. She is talking to a detective. So the reader is kind of the detective. And then all of a sudden, it's flipped and you're getting the story from Winnie's point of view. And it's very different from the story that Ava told. And that's where it got interesting for me. And I'm not going to say too much about it because I don't want to spoil it. Would I recommend this? I think so. It's interesting enough. I will tell you the one thing that I didn't much care for is that the author spent a lot of time describing the ins and outs of the scam itself. Like how it works, who are the people they talk to, who are the people that they hire to do certain tasks to make this scam work, how it all works, the ins and outs. It's very, very detailed, and I don't think it needed to be that detailed. What saved it is you do hear more about Ava's experience as a Chinese American growing up and why she made the decisions that she made, why Winnie made the decisions that she made, the relationship between Ava and Winnie, the relationship between Ava and her husband, where they're having serious problems, and why, and how Ava handles them. So that's kind of what saved the story for me. It's an okay. I mean, if the plot sounds interesting to you, then I would recommend it. It is well written. I like the way they did the dual perspective. There is some dark wit that I found enjoyable. I'm glad I read it. I just didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I would. And I will just end this video on a high note and talk about the 3 picture books that I read when I was in a panic thinking that I wasn't going to have enough books to talk to you about. The first picture book I read was How to Talk Like a Bear by Charlie Grandy and illustrated by Alex G. Griffiths. Look at this cover, you guys. It's super cute. I just pulled it off the shelf at work and flipped through it during some downtime. The illustrations, of course, were very cute, and it was a cute little story. It was kind of a bear teaching an unseen student how to speak like a bear, roar and grr and growl, and how one roar could mean one thing and another roar could mean another thing. I think what it was trying to do was teach different ways that children can express frustration. I think it was a little off center. I found it was kind of muddled, and the ending was a little, I don't know, unsatisfying, and I don't think a child would understand it as he should. But this is a picture book, and I thought the illustrations were adorable. I thought the idea was adorable, and I enjoyed it because it's a picture book. The next one is very well known, and I think I read it as a kid, but it's been so long that I decided to read it again, and it was a quick read. And that is The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein. If you're one of the 3 people who are unaware of this book, it's an absolute adorable yet heartbreaking story about kindness and giving and sacrifice and what we do for the people that we love. It basically tells the story of a relationship of a little boy and a tree. They love each other. When the boy's a little boy, he climbs on the tree, he plays in the tree, and the tree just absolutely loves this boy unconditionally and gives and gives and gives. Meanwhile, you're following the boy as he grows up. He has different needs. He says, you know, he's a teenager. He doesn't have time to play with the tree. You know, what can you do for me? And the tree said, well, here, you can eat my apples, and okay. And then the boy gets older and has other needs, and you know, the tree is always sad because the boy doesn't spend as much time with him. The tree gives and gives and gives, and the man takes and takes and takes until the tree doesn't have anything left to give. It's tragic and it's sad, but it's beautiful at the same time, and I recommend it for anybody and everybody if you haven't read it. It's an absolute stunning, succinct lesson on kindness and selflessness. Okay, so I'm a total liar. It wasn't 3 picture books that I read. It was 2 picture books, and it's an essay, really. And funnily enough, this is an essay by George Saunders. And if you remember, I read George Saunders' most recent collection of short stories for the Booktube Prize, and I did not care for them at all. But then I also read his little short story called Fox 8, and I loved it. So I wasn't sure about this one. This one's called Congratulations, by the way, Some Thoughts on Kindness. And what this is basically the speech that George Saunders gave at the graduation address at Syracuse University in 2013. I guess several months after that address, the transcript of the speech was posted on a website, and evidently it went viral and it really struck a chord. And basically it's just talking about kindness. If you do nothing else with your life, if you succeed in no other area in your life, please just put some effort towards being kind. And it sounds so simple. And really, I think that's the point of his address. It is simple and it has absolutely profound effects. I'm not going to say much more about it. I absolutely recommend picking up this little essay, this speech that George Saunders gave. It's brilliant. It's beautiful. It's important. It's maybe 60 pages. You can read it in a sitting. You don't even have to buy it. You can go into the bookstore and hide in a corner somewhere and read it. It's fantastic. That is it. Those are all the books that I read in the month of June. I'm so sorry this went on for so long. I hope you enjoyed it. Have you read any of these books? I would love to hear your thoughts on them. What did you read in June that you loved? I would love to know that too. Or you can just say hi down in the doodly-doo. If you're still watching at this point, please consider giving that like button a boop, and a subscribe would be wonderful. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time with an update about Jake. Again, please send me your thoughts and prayers. I really appreciate it. See you next time. Bye-bye.